Hey, welcome back. Uh, Welcome back to my video series on understanding ISO 9001. Through this video, we shall work at understanding clause number 4.3, determining the scope of the quality management system. While in pursuit of ISO 9001 implementation or audit, one of the clauses of paramount importance will be clause number 4.3. Let me first read this through and then we can talk about it. It says the organization shall determine the boundaries and applicability of the QMS to establish its scope. When determining the scope, the organization shall consider A. The external and internal issues referred to in 4.1, B. Requirements of the relevant interested parties referred to in 4.2, C. The product and services of the organization. The organization shall apply all the requirements of this international standard if they are applicable within the determined scope of its quality management system. The scope of the organizational QMS shall be available and be maintained as a documented information. The scope shall state the type of products and services covered and provide justification for any requirements of this international standard that the organization determines is not applicable to the scope of its QMS. Conformity to this international standard may only be claimed if the requirements determined as not being applicable do not affect the organization's ability or responsibility to ensure the conformity of its product and services and the enhancement of customer satisfaction. While this is a very straightforward part of the ISO 9001 standard, but if understood well, this particular clause in the ISO standard is what will lay the foundation stone of your implementation or auditing journey for the 9001 standard. If you are the implementation person or representing the team that has to do with the implementation of 9001, you must carefully articulate what are going to be the boundaries and applicability of the QMS to establish its scope. ISO 9001 gives you the freedom to choose between the several products that you have. So let's say you are a company that produces 20 products and for some reason you only want to take up 10 products for ISO 9001 certification allowed. You can go ahead and mention that in the documented information that you wish to maintain. Similarly, if you operate out of multiple geographies, maybe multiple countries or cities, you can choose which locations would you want to keep as in scope, would you want to keep as out scope. You can also look at excluding departments, but you must always realize that should you choose to keep some particular location, business process, etc., out of scope, it mustn't affect the organization's ability or responsibility to ensure the conformity of its product and services and the enhancement of customer satisfaction. I recommend that you go through my video on clause number 1, where I have mentioned the basic conscience of ISO 9001. For me, the three driving elements of ISO 9001 is about demonstrable ability to meet the requirements as laid down by a customer and the statutory and regulatory requirement. Your ability to enhance the customer satisfaction through the effective application of the system and of improvement of the system. So when you are deciding on the scope of the ISO 9001 implementation, you must understand that you cannot do away with these three basic conscience elements. And if you have outsourced some business process, and if you have outsourced some particular part of your business process, controls need to be exhibited if it affects any of these three elements that I mentioned. Let's say you have a shared service model wherein all your HR function is managed at a particular location, and for some reason you've chosen to keep that location as out of scope, then all the HR controls that are required by the ISO 9001 standard still continue to be mandatory. The organization will have to exhibit that such outsourced processes have been managed well to ensure that organizational processes are able to manage business accordingly. Wherever you are maintaining scope as a documented information, you must ensure that whatever exclusions you've taken from the ISO 9001 standard, that exclusion and the justification for the same must be maintained together at the same place. A point of caution here, you being able to convince the auditor for exclusion is going to be very difficult. So you must have justifiable reasons, and that reason cannot impact the organization's ability or responsibility to ensure the conformity of its products and services and enhancement of customer satisfaction. If you are the ISO 9001 auditor, either external or internal, your start point of your audit exercise should be looking at the scope as manifested in the documented information maintained. Your audit schedule, audit plan, etc. will have to consider the scope as mentioned, and you must always try and seek justification of the exclusion that the organization has sought for non-conforming to any particular clause requirements. Typical situations wherein organizations seek exclusion could be because one could be a recent example that I have had for a medical equipment company based out of India, which is headquartered in Switzerland. But the India unit is essentially a sales driven company only. They are not producing any product here. So wherever design and development of the product related requirements are mentioned in the ISO 9001 clause, the India unit chose to take exclusion, and it was justified. A different organization was producing products, but the design component of the product was always provided to them by their customers. They chose to take exclusion for design and development related clauses as in the ISO 9001 standard, and it was justifiable. Let me sum it up for you. Scope must be available as a documented information. If you are seeking any exclusion, you must mention the exclusion and its justification. The ISO standard allows you to choose from your entire product or service categories, but that must be mentioned wherever you are mentioning the scope. You can choose to go in with certain locations and do away with certain, but again, it must be mentioned as a part of your scope statement for ISO 9001. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you.